What is your secret? How do you make yourself still motivated?
Wow, this is going to change everything. But if I was doing the same thing 20 years that I started doing 20 years ago, I probably would have sold it or given up. You've got to find these points of rejuvenation. Find things that challenge you. Find things that excite you. Find things that scare you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Adam. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, thanks. Nice to be here today.
Adam, I'm super happy that we have a chance to have a conversation with you, with your experience being a developer forever and working with Navy and Department of Defense. I guess you're one of the most experienced people in creating successful products in regulated industries and also with AI. So can you tell me how this experience helped you to be where you are now?
It's always good. I mean, in life, we have lots of experiences. I mean, there are things you do, and along the way, you think they may not be important, but as you go along in life, you realize how useful they were. So I started off as a programmer. I was a programmer at the age of 10, if you read my bio. And, back in the United Kingdom in the mid 80s, software, computers was a very empowering thing. It lets you, as a person, build things that others wanted. And I remember writing computer games when I was about 10, and people at school thought they were cool. And when you're a geek in school and people think things are cool, that makes you feel cool, which is nice. And then I went to university and I ended up getting a job in IT rather than in my degree, which was physics. And I really loved the idea of computers at the time because it was the beginning of the internet age and the world was really opening up. So you could work anywhere in the world. People were moving to, I moved to the United States after college, and I worked in the IT industry, working with some commercial clients, and then with, as you mentioned, the government and defense and things. And the great thing with computers, you could work in any industry. So I worked in telecommunications, finance, and then I did some government work. And I got to work with people from other parts of the United States and other countries. And I just think technology is a really good opener. And as a developer, you get to try out all these different things. You get to work in these industries. You get to solve complicated business problems. You get to meet clients. And you realize how technology is just such an enabler for the world. And then 2006, I left where I was working to found my company. And I think being a developer was very helpful because if you need to raise money to pay someone, that means you've got to go find funding, and that changes your trajectory of your company. So I bootstrapped Inflectra, and because I was the first programmer, I didn't have to pay a salary to myself. I could just take my kids out of daycare and just be a stay-at-home dad, and I did that part-time whilst coding the very first version. So I think being a programmer, having the business experience from my former job gave me optionality in life. It gave me the optionality to found a company, build the first version myself, have the business skills from working in IT before that and how to do sales, how to do marketing. Whereas I think if I'd left college and tried to start a company, which a lot of people do out of the gate, I feel like I wouldn't have had those skills. I didn't do an MBA. I didn't have a business education. My parents weren't, working on Wall Street. So I didn't have some of those advantages that people have. So by going to work in an IT consulting business for 8-9 years, I learned some of those softer skills and business, accounting, sales, collections, how to collect invoices, how to do revenue recognition, things that as a programmer I wouldn't have been exposed to. But when you look at the fact that I was a programmer and I'd done these jobs together, it gave me that ability to start a company and bootstrap it. And so why bootstrap it? Well, one thing at the beginning was, well, how do I start a company? I've got a young family. If I raise money, I'm going to be working 100 hours a day. I'm never going to see my young family. So for me, it was a lifestyle decision. And for those that listen to this podcast, if you've not started a company because you feel like you haven't got the time, your lifestyle doesn't allow it, bootstrapping is a much more affordable, available option. And especially with AI now making programming more accessible to non-programmers, I do feel like it's a great option to build a business and allows you to do it at your own pace and your own scale and have it work with your lifestyle. Raising money is great. Everyone reads about the 100 million ARR companies out there, but people forget there's a lot of problems that can be solved at 2 million ARR. A small company that can solve a very specific niche or niche can be done without raising a lot of money. And you can do it as a solo entrepreneur or a small business. There's just lots of great problems out there that you can solve. Just do it easier, cheaper, better usability. I think a lot of people just don't appreciate that. So it's a long answer to say, I feel like being a programmer as a background, spending some time in business and industry was a great nurturing experience for starting my own business.
But you didn't select the easiest area where to work. Quality assurance and regulated industries. It's like not the
Well, that's true.
top of the mind idea for developers to work in, because a lot of people usually hate regulations.
Yeah, they hate regulation. Well, when we started the company, it was just testing and QA. We hadn't taken on the regulated industry piece. It was just QA, and that's still I have to tell people. I always tell people I hate QA. I hate testing. I really hate both. with a passion. So how it will happen is I was working on the project for the US Navy and we had to run testing. And I was the project manager now. I moved from being a tester to project manager, SaaS architect. And my colleague and I were running testing and we hated it. We had spreadsheets, we had whiteboards, we had printouts, and we had like US Marines and US Navy personnel literally typing manual tests and writing down the result on paper. And we had to pay people overnight to take what they'd written down, put it into an Excel sheet so we could track the testing. It was insane. So I said to my friend, there must be tools out there that could do some of this. And there are tools and were tools, but they were hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were incredibly complicated to use, and their deployment was a massive IT undertaking. And I said at the time, like, there are modern SaaS platforms out there that could do some of this. Why has no one done this yet? And I said, it's not that hard. It's not rocket science. I had a physics degree. I know what rocket science is. My son is an aerospace engineer. He does real rocket science. I don't. This is just software. So my friend said to me, well, go ahead and do it then. So I said, all right, I will. So I waited a year or two till I had the timing was right for me and family. And then I left the company and started the business. But my friend had inspired me by challenging me to say, there's a problem. We know there's a problem because we're facing it. So I think when you ask, well, why did I pick QA? It was it was just a problem that I saw that I was experiencing and other members of the company at Sapient were experiencing. So I knew it wasn't my unique problem. So if people listen to this podcast, think about, do I have a problem that's got, can be solved? Venture capitalists will say, oh, what's your total addressable market and all that stuff? What's your TAM? I think at that point I was just thinking like, well, I know I've got a problem. I work in a consulting firm. We have this problem, and I have colleagues who work in other consulting firms that compete with us. They also have that problem when I've spoken to them. So I feel in my intuition, in my gut, there is a addressable market. And I know that our company can't afford it, and we're a consulting firm. And if we choose not to afford it, I should say, they could afford it, but they chose not to, it will make the project unprofitable. So I realized that if you look at the economics in the market, there's a gap in the market, and that's why I chose it. And then the regulated industries came later when we wanted to further differentiate ourselves against other companies that then got into the market because we were one of the first. Others started to follow us, and we realized that there was a higher price point and a stickiness that you get by going after those more regulated clients than simply everyone. Now, we do sell opportunistic to everyone, but our go-to market and our white papers and our messaging is more geared towards the high compliance industry customers, but we do sell to anyone who wants to buy with a credit card. And that's another thing, remember, opportunistic selling is different to marketing. It's like we'll sell to everyone, but we focus on driving sales and marketing to specific audiences. And I think as a small company, you have to often do that. You can't always be 100% focused on one customer profile, but you can't market to everyone because you haven't got the budget. We have $100 million to spend on ads. I remember seeing, Monday.com and ClickUp wrapping entire buses and trains in every major city with adverts. And I'm thinking, like, well, my mother knows about these companies, and she has no idea what these companies do. So that's mass marketing, right? To a highly unqualified audience. But that's saturation marketing. When you're a small company, you haven't got that kind of budget. So you have to know your ICP, but you also can be opportunistic as well.
It's very interesting. So basically, you solved the problem you felt in love with because you hated
Yes.
doing some part of work, and then you switched to more complex industries, but that are sticky. From
Right.
your experience in consultancy, working with different types of products, what are the differences in mindset when you switch to regulated industries? Are there any? Because at the beginning, everybody will solve the problem, but I guess the mindset and the process for developing the products may be a bit different because like it's not fail fast because the mistakes are expensive.
Well, that's a good question. I think because we're uniquely servicing QA, even in a small company, to some degree mustn't fail. It's funny. Our audience, at least initially, was testers, and I would say now with our bigger focus, we see project managers, VPs of IT, and risk managers. But the core market was always testers and QA. Now they'll find any fault with any software, even if it's a two-person company. So I would say on the quality side, we've always had to have that high bar of quality because if you're going to persuade someone who's testing other like ERP systems or websites to use your product, they can't turn off that part of their brain. They will find the bugs whether they intend to or not. So I feel like for us, at least, quality was a constant, whether it was a big customer, a regulated customer, or not. The big thing that changed, I would say, between the two was really around configurability, compliance, traceability, auditability, and unfortunately, content. So when you're selling to anyone who's building a website or anyone who's going to an app to test, you can have relatively high level marketing. The application doesn't have to have a lot of enterprise type features like audit logs, tracing of every single change that was made. There's a lot of features that you build for the administrator that you don't need to build for a non-enterprise, non-compliance focused customer. So I would say the ratio of functionality for end user to admin becomes quite different. That ratio changes when you hit the compliance market because they're going to want things like single sign-on, OAuth, LDAP. They're going to want audit trails of every system change. You change someone's role, you change someone's account permissions, audit log is necessary. SIM integration, APIs, a lot of those enterprise features, MFA, they become really important. Secondly, you've got to spend a lot of money on things like SOC 2, ISO 27001, all of the audits, and those are time consuming and requires an organization that is willing to implement these changes across the organization. We're not a big company, but it was a huge undertaking to get the SOC 2 and ISO certs because what it meant was we had to behave like a big company. And I mean that we had to become bureaucratic. For example, before that, we could simply say, oh, we're going to change someone's role. We change their role. In Google Workspace, now we've got to log a change request. It's got to go to someone. It's got to be approved. Even to make simple changes in the company now, we have to have an audit trail and a record, and we use our own tool to do that actually. But I think it just made it from a very freewheeling culture that everyone was like, oh, we all get along and we all make decisions informally. When you're working in high assurance industries, they expect you to follow a more stringent set of processes internally. So I think it was the culture change around that. And some people really hating it. And some people actually left the company over it because they said, I didn't want to work at a company that was this bureaucratic. And I'm like, well, we're not really that bureaucratic, but we are more than we were 2 years ago, but we have to be. So I think that was a huge change. And then I think also marketing, you have to write a lot more white papers because you're going to go work in, life sciences. Well, there's 10 white papers for life sciences that they have to understand how to configure the tool. You might need a third-party consultant to work with you to help your customers get the most value out of using this. So it does increase the complexity of onboarding, increases the complexity of marketing, and it does increase the complexity of sales. We do mostly self-service sales to the opportunistic clients. We do mostly directed, discovery call, demo, POC to the larger clients in the regulated space. So it does change your go-to-market. So I think those are some of the things to think about. And the product itself, you have to also balance that usability versus complexity. That's always a hard one. People
And we
say, I
also
want it to look like Jira. I want it to be usable, but I also want to have all these features that they don't have. So,
So
right.
you mentioned you're also using your product. Yeah, so that helps you to understand like what you want to build, what kind of features to add. But now your main persona is buyer persona, not the user persona, because if admin buys the software, that's good for business. And maybe like, do you see any changes how companies buy software? Is user satisfaction getting more important, or it's still buyer persona who decides?
Oh, it's interesting that it seems to change a lot. Wow, how to answer that question? It's always a multifaceted buyer. So I would say certainly we're selling into teams. If we were selling a product that you would buy as an individual, so let's say if we had software that you as an individual would buy yourself, like an IDE or a tool for me as a developer or me as a tester, then I think it's the buyer, the user persona is almost the most important. They like the tool, they've got a credit card, it's under their limit, they go buy it. We're selling team software that has to appeal to at least a team of about 10 people, maybe an enterprise of several thousand. So it's always going to be a multifaceted user buyer persona. So what we see is, first of all, there's the there's the end user who has the problem. So this might be the tester, it might be the QA manager. That's one persona. So it's the beneficial user persona. Then you've got the impacted user persona. These are the adjacent users that aren't going to benefit from the product, but they need to use it for the other people to benefit. So for that example, a developer, they might not want to use a tool to do bug tracking or project management or testing. They rather use what they're doing today or just using Excel or Google Sheets. But if they don't fill the data in, then the managers and the testers won't benefit. So but they often can be roadblocks. They can be what we call bomb throwers. Then you have like the economic buyer, as you mentioned. This could be the VP of IT. Then you have the compliance teams. Then you have the actual purchasing department, and they have other goals. They may have goals to buy from certain socioeconomic groups or certain countries, or they have a master service agreement with a big company which they want to buy from, and maybe you subcontract. So it's like a 10-person journey when you're selling into these medium to large companies as an enterprise sale. SMB is a bit different. We don't do as much SMB, small medium business. If you're doing small businesses, then often the CEO is like, I want this tool, I'm going to buy it. The users, they'll use it. I think larger companies, the VPs and CIOs, they're never going to use this tool. Maybe look at dashboards. So you have to think about, I want functionality that I can show to the CIO that's a nice dashboard. I want to have the end users find it not so frictionful that they hate it. I want the people who benefit from it to love it. the people who have to use it to at least tolerate it, and I want the procurement people to at least think it complies. So I'd say we've seen much more of that. And before they talk to you, I would say there's a much more research people are doing. They're going to ask AI. They're going to go to ChatGPT or Perplexity, and they're going to say, I'm looking at 10 tools in my segment. Tell me about them. They're going to go to G2 Crowd. They're going to go to Capterra. They're going to go to PeerSpot. When they talk to you for a demo or even a trial, they have probably read 5 or 6 pieces of content, and they'll have questions. And maybe they got hard questions that you haven't even thought of. So I would say the buyer is an informed, a research buyer, and you as a product marketer, product salesperson, a product owner, you have to give all those pieces of content in every format, video, text, you name it. And you need to start thinking about where are they searching, where are they going. We're spending a lot of money right now, not just doing SEO, but doing, I guess, I don't know what the new term is, but SEO for AI, which is, so our SEO company, they run giant queries every day of every possible set of questions that people are asking, and they run a sentiment analysis and they run a visibility analysis. And every week we meet with them and they'll tell us, well, this week, Inflectra as a company relative to its competitors went up by 2% in visibility, but went down 1% in sentiment. Where do they get that sentiment from? Well, there was a negative review on G2, or some AI somehow managed to come up with an answer that was negative. Where do they get that source from? Let's find that source. So it's a very much a real-time analysis you have to do to understand what your users think of you, where are they posting content, and where are the AI engines getting their content from. It's often your users. So you have to keep users happy when you after you bought. It's an endless cycle. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting time. And regarding AI, as I know, you also adding some AI features to your product. What
Right.
is your experience now? Like, are you happy with value it provides, or because everybody is hyping like that in a few years, almost everything will be automated with AI? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's
And do you
interesting.
actually have some numbers to measure success ratio of AI quality assurance, for example?
I can actually, and it's interesting. We were an early adopter of AI. 2.5 years ago, we added AI into our products. We first did it with a bring your own LLM model, so we could test out different models and get it to market quickly. We've replaced that now with a natively embedded AI using Amazon. We're an AWS partner. We're actually a Gen AI partner of AWS, one of only 58 companies in the world. So we really worked fast to work with Amazon because we recognized a couple of things. Companies, and especially in high assurance, are not yet ready for AI, or they weren't ready a year ago. But other fast-moving companies were already moving in this direction. So and they're not thinking of QA. Look at what everyone is doing or has been doing. Marketing and blog and content writing. They've been doing code generation, lots of code writing. Agentic AI writes lots of code, and they're doing a fair amount of chatbots and assistants. But no one's been thinking about the quality of the AI or even using it to catch up with the code. So people are writing more code, the quality is deteriorating, and from a QA standpoint, it's actually been a nightmare. So what we did is we said, well, let's think about what are our clients trying to do, and let's look at the application. Let's look at the friction points in our app, and let's use AI to solve them. So rather than just throwing we could easily have just said, well, everyone's got a chatbot, a Copilot. Let's throw Copilot into our tool, and we'll wash our hands of it and say, you've got your AI. There you go. Have fun. We didn't do that. We took a user-centered approach. We said, what is the challenges with our product? Where do we people spend time? And if you look at our tool, what they were doing is they get a requirement or they write a requirement for a user story, and they have to write test cases. They've got to write tests. They've got to automate the tests. They've got to identify the risks. They've got to, are the requirements any good? No, they're probably rubbish that someone wrote. How do we review those? How do we improve them? And that's what took time. So we actually added built-in functionality using AI. But we weren't selling AI. We weren't saying, here's AI. We were saying, here's some new functionality to review requirements against the industry standard and automatically improve it for you. Let's set it write 20 test cases for you automatically. You can then edit them, and that will be much faster than if you wrote them by hand. Let's identify risks. What risks are in this new functionality that you're creating? Let's identify the risks. So what we did is we identified like 10 business use cases and friction points. So some of it was improving the quality of what the data they had. Some of it was reducing the time to get from 20 test cases from which would take maybe 2 days to write. We now write them in 2 minutes. Now you have to edit them, obviously. We found though, if you look at the time it takes to take a test case that we've written and edit it versus creating it from scratch and the number of clicks it takes, particularly, it's a 60-70% improvement in speed. And we've got clients that have given us this in testimonials, and they find one or two test cases they didn't think of or risks they didn't think of. And the value there is equality, which is I would have missed that until we hit development, and hit production. So it's A, reducing time, which is great. B, improving quality. And that's when I will go back to people say, well, everyone's talking about speed, speed, speed. Well, AI can be a force for improving quality. It can be a force for decreasing quality if you just take its
Mhm.
answers and go with it. So we've actually managed with our AI to improve quality and improve speed and improve satisfaction. And we did it using very simple use cases. Like the AI is not very complicated. An AI researcher would say, oh, it's so basic, but our customers say that's amazing. I think that's the difference. Take a user-centered view. If you start with Steve Jobs always said this. I mean, start with what the user needs, not what they said they want. The user will say, oh, I want a chatbot. I want AI. No, no, that's not what you need. Let's study the user. Let's look at what they actually need, and let's think about what AI can bring to value and other things that are not AI, and let's give them to the customer. And I think that's the biggest thing I would say. My lesson I've learned throughout 20 years of running Inflectra, or 19, almost 20, and the 8 years at Sapien, your customers never know what they want until they see it. And the biggest mistake people will make is they'll ask the customer what they say they need, and you get 20 features. And then instead of a good designer would look at the 20 features and say, well, these are symptoms of a problem. What's the problem? Let's give them one feature that solves all 30. The 20 they thought of, the 10 they didn't think of, and do it in one holistic way that is easy to use. And I think when it came to the AI, we did that. We said, let's think about what can AI do for our customers, how we make a solution that gives value, not just features. And I think that's why we've been successful with the AI. And I know in the testing space, there's a lot of empty promises, a lot of hype. Like if you go to any conference right now in testing, they'll say, there'll be no more developers, there'll be no more testers. You push a button, you get the app, and you push a second button and it tests it for you. And there's some truth to both of these things, but it's not the whole truth. So I think looking at what users need and what products need, it's a more complicated story than that.
And do you also cover code reviews or only testing?
We don't ourselves do code reviews. Other people, I'm sure the tools do that. We actually use GitHub Enterprise to do a lot of the security testing, and we do some code generation. So we can generate automated tests. We can generate sample tests. And we do a lot of analysis functionality, and we want to do more of that. We can find flaky tests. We can also do some autonomous testing where the AI can actually start to control the screen using visual testing.
Mhm.
Traditional automation is very much around clicking on a button, looking at the web page or the app. And if the app changes, it can often break the test. So we're using how can we use AI to make our tests more resilient and more like a user and find usability issues. So there's some tools we're starting to integrate where you can tell the AI, is this a good page? Like, is this page look good? Has it got you good usability? And the AI will look at the page and give you a qualitative assessment. So in the same time we're running a traditional, like a functional test, which is click through the 20 steps in my workflow to get from a, I don't know, new flight reservation to a book ticket, or an ERP might be I've got to make a purchase requisition and get goods and complete the order. Well, in that 20-step process, which we can automate, and we've done that before, we can now ask usability questions at key points, and the AI can look at the screen and will come back and say, well, this page violates some user's accessibility. This page has buttons of insufficient contrast. We think this is very cluttered, or this application is not as usable as it was 2 versions back. So the AI can start to give you some qualitative measures in conjunction with some of the more traditional pass-fail metrics you get in testing. So I would say we're not using it so much for code reviews, but we are using it for more of the heuristic side of testing that's often always been human-centric. And if you look at AI generating code, if we are going to get to a world where we're generating 20 times the amount of code per person, who's going to test that? We don't have testers already. So I think having AI be able to speed up testing and increase quality, not decrease quality, is going to be critical.
Yeah, I totally agree that it's always tempting to become platforms that covers everything. Like, and then you're starting competing with tools that are specialized in reviewing the
Right.
code.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also like interesting because I've seen the benchmark about code reviews tools, and
Hmm.
on average, they produce much more false positives.
Oh, really? Oh, I
Well,
believe it.
finding bugs. I guess that GPT-5 has the most, the best metrics. Only 50% of devices are incorrect because they recommend
That's
you
a lot.
refactor some stuff that is not necessary. And you need to have this kind of experience, yeah, because there are a lot of complaints that AI thinks that they are building rockets or something that has to be for enterprise level security, like they are building Amazon software. But and actually, for most businesses and solutions, this type of complexity is not necessary. Or sometimes it can hard.
Yeah, I mean, our AI journey was very simple. Most of what we're using we have 2 products. One is only using prompt engine, only using prompts. There's no RAG, there's no vector databases. It's just simple prompts and some good prompts, good testing, and good use cases that deliver value. On the other tool, we're starting to use some agentic work. We're starting to do some RAG. We've got some RAG and vector database embeddings, but again, very sparingly. In fact, what we vector embedded was just the user manual. We took the user manual and we embedded that into the RAG as a RAG so that we could give the user very good answers and very good assistance. And then we also give the user the ability to give feedback. But the automated testing code generation, it takes a manual test and it writes the automated test for you. And we've got a very high success rate on that because it's conservative. We're not trying to do everything for the user. We're taking an app that they've already learned the page objects from, and we're just writing the code for them or the codeless framework for them. And because we're doing it in very simple, I think, conservative steps, we're showing the customers it took you 6 hours today to do it manually. With AI, you're now assisted to do it in 2 hours, and the quality is good, if not better. We didn't say it would take 2 minutes. That level is not yet, that's coming. So it's like building slowly, showing value, showing productivity, building trust, building confidence is the way we've done this. We haven't tried to give them a rocket ship of AI. It's more like a faster car or maybe a different kind of engine. That's been really helpful for them in accepting it as well. The other thing is also from a change management. Everyone's really worried about losing their jobs right now, and we're trying to show people that this is a AI that's going to help you change your work. It's not necessarily going to be the end of work as well.
Also, interesting question. So, but it might be totally stupid because I'm not in your industry, but like
Right.
from my experience, I do a lot of coding with AI.
Yeah.
And as far as I understand, there are some areas of software development when you still need people to do it, like some APIs integrations, when it's really hard to create end-to-end tests because everything changes on the fly. And do you think that AI can also help to handle this type of work when you can use just-in-time testing with AI agents? Because we have MCP servers, we have
I was
CLI
just
to
going to say MCP is interesting there because there are some tools now that can write MCP servers from an API. So if you've got an application with an API, you can wrap that with an MCP server so the AI can write the code on the fly. I mean, I do think AI will definitely speed up API testing, API integration, no doubt about it. A lot of the work of API integration is just boilerplate. It's so boring. It's copying Swagger files and writing code. I mean, AI, I think, will help with all of that. Now, APIs get changed, they get broken all the time. They shouldn't. I have a big philosophy about you should never break an API. We have 7 versions of our API to avoid doing this, and many other companies don't do this, and it's very frustrating for people who are building integrations. But that's the world we live in. So I think AI can certainly help speed up the testing of APIs. It's not going to be a panacea. Now, is there going to be the point where an application will dynamically look at the API on the fly and be orchestrating it? Now, that's what some people are saying. So I think don't think we're there yet. That's where the AI is literally it's like RPA but with AI. So the idea there will be there's no static code for APIs. When I make a request, the AI on the fly builds the code, runs it, and then destroys itself, fully ephemeral. I don't think we're there yet. It's too expensive. AI is not fast enough. And it's too dangerous because the API might be misinterpreted. So I think AI is helping in terms of doing testing. It can write boilerplate code, it can speed things up. I don't think it's going to completely change how we do API testing yet. Potentiality is for there, obviously. Like any type of testing, it could do a lot of that work autonomously. I still think you'll need human oversight to it. There's big issues on the cybersecurity side of that, of course. If you've got live APIs and someone's in your organization, a machine, writing code, interacting with it, malware, that's a huge target for malware. I mean, you've now got an authenticated, authorized user inside the organization, inside the firewall, making authenticated, authorized calls against other APIs. To me, that is the most dangerous vector if you could get into that. So I think people are still very worried about that environment in production. Gone to several CIO roundtables, talking to some CIOs of major banks and other large companies. I think that's their nightmare scenario. That's why they've been very hesitant with AI, especially when it's AI that's agentic. Content AI is one thing, generative AI, because you can write false blogs that get you sued. You can write false HR manuals that get you sued. You can have false refund policies that happened that can get you forced to pay penalties to customers. Even with the content side, there's risks. You can write a defamatory article, get it published. All that stuff happens. Now, with agentic AI, you've now got effectively a cyber hacker working on your payroll. So I think people are very worried about agentic AI autonomously. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I mean, malware is already agentic, so you have agentic malware. So the fact that the cyber attacking world is already using agentic AI means we'll have to have agentic AI as a defender. It's an arms race. But I think big companies are still trying to grapple with that reality.
I believe that you're in one of the most interesting industries now because everybody is focusing now on generating code, but as you mentioned, quality assurance is becoming even more important. And then somebody told that we expect billion developers, people who will be trying to generate some at least internal tools by
Yep.
themselves using AI.
Yeah.
But then we will still need people to make a quality assurance and understand that the software is secure and reliable. What are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. I mean, I think for us in the QA world, it's a huge industry opportunity. I think people who focus on the testing community, sorry, in the development community, I feel like that's a market that may be different, more challenging. I mean, I think a lot of developers may end up becoming testers because I think a lot of not because there isn't development work. Don't get me wrong. There's always development but tasks, but I think the number of developers we may need may be less relative to the number that graduated in that industry, and the number of tests we have may be under the number we need. So I do think we're going to see a slight reskilling. People who may have gone into software, people who go into computer science, and I mean that in its broadest sense, always knew that computer it was never about programming. Programming is one piece, it's architecture, design. It's about scalability, maintainability, a whole aspect of computer systems. And I think if you go into it with a computer science mindset, you're going to think of it the right way. You'll have many different jobs. And right now there may be a more of a trend towards risk management, more of a trend towards QA. If you went to college and you thought, I want to be a programmer, and that's the job I want, that may be changing. So I think you are going to see a greater emphasis on QA, risk management, cybersecurity, performance, all of the functional and non-functional aspects, ethics, bias. AI itself is difficult to test. So we're actually beginning to think about how do we test AI with AI? Because I don't mean using AI to test systems. We're doing that already. I mean, how do you test an AI system itself? When you ask it the same question 10 times, you get 10 different answers. That's a non-deterministic system, which is intrinsically harder to test than a deterministic system. So we made testing harder itself, as well as developing more stuff. So I think those are the two big challenges of our era is how do we test more stuff because we have more people slash machines together writing stuff, and the stuff we're writing is harder to test intrinsically because it's non-deterministic. We need to find new ways of doing testing and new tools, techniques, and I think there's a bigger opportunity in the testing space. I think the CIO or CEO of Cursor on a conference even said that how are we going to test all this? So, I mean, they recognize this. It's a hard challenge. And what I think anyone listening to this podcast looking to get into testing, I would say testing was always seen as a bit of the stepchild of development. Always was. I mean, I was the same, like, oh, I'm a developer. But I think testing is becoming a much more important discipline and risk management too. I think a lot of the software disciplines in computer science will become more important and maybe sexier too.
You mentioned that you have some experience with user interface testing and like if it's correct, like to designs and to the requirements and to
Right.
the accessibility requirements. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see the progress of that tool set we have and what is the future there?
Wow. I mean, UI, well, there's UI testing and UI design. So, I mean, there's accessibility and I say there's UI more generally. Accessibility is becoming more important because it's becoming legal. I mean, Europe in particular, but even in North America somewhat, much as regulation is a bad word. So I think on the accessibility side, first of all, that's becoming more important because there's now becoming real penalties for not doing it. And there are tools now that can make this better. Both AI and non-AI tools have made this easier than it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So I think accessibility is becoming more important and easier to do, and their tools are helping. And hopefully, even the AI agentic tools that build the apps have this hopefully somewhat built in, maybe from scratch. At least they have an appreciation. I've seen some developers build horrible UIs. We had one developer who should remain nameless who decided to, on the first version of his application, to make everything in plaid, like literally stripes, and I don't know what was going on. So developers are often horrible at making UI. Agentic tools like, Cursor and so on. The app they build at least is vanilla. It's at least not maybe not terrible, maybe not great, but it's at least a starting point. So I think that's helping. Now, in terms of usability design and testing, it's interesting. I always thought this would be a discipline that AI would be more difficult for, but I've heard that you can run a video recording of someone using an application through AI, and it can in transcripts find out what are the key obstacles, what are the key points of improvement. So AI is already helping looking at traditional usability video recordings, and it can start to find key points and key assumptions. The challenge as a human, if you're watching a long video of someone using an app and clicking through it, is it's hard to stay focused. It's quite tedious and mind-numbing. AI is starting to find patterns in what people are doing in screens and be able to improve it. Now, maybe the other question we should be thinking about, though, I think, is what's the UI of the future even going to be? Because we keep thinking about screens, but the new X Real glasses are coming out, and Meta's got the glasses, and there's been many abortive attempts. Google Glass was a failure. I think Apple Vision Pro has not been a success, but I think we're starting to get into the point where we're going to have more wearable UI. And that means the UI is going to be different. And obviously voice. If we're using AI assistants, is the future going to be asking it to do things? Is the AI doing things? Is it, because we always have thought about UI for humans, right? We build the UI for humans. Maybe the users are not humans. If I'm
Mhm.
going to book a trip somewhere, I'll ask my assistant, book my flight to Amsterdam. I'm going there in a few months. I need to stay at a hotel. Can you book that for me? And it will do that for me. You'll find the best price. It will use an agentic workflow to find my company's travel policies. It will go to the conference website, figure out whether there are any block booked rooms. There's like 10 things I have to do today to do that. It would do all those using a series of agentic workflows and come back and say, here's your flight, it's sent to your phone, your boarding pass will be in your SMS. If we do all that, maybe half those UIs go away. Maybe it's a series of REST services and MCP servers. So the UI of tomorrow may be different.
Yeah, we are currently exploring a lot of generative UI and voice conversational interfaces. So there's always a place for UI when it's faster. For example, like
Yeah,
if you need to explain or compare some information, talking about that or providing lots of text, it takes time. And you have a few icons, charts to
yeah.
just show what works better for you. And if you need a confirmation for, especially for regulation, you need buttons and signature boxes for
Right,
approval.
right, right. That's true.
Because you don't want people to be afraid that I didn't hear correctly. Uh, you said no, and he said, "Okay, thank you for approval."
No,
Then good luck.
that's true. Yeah, and I think it's a good point. It's understanding what's appropriate for which medium it's a really good point you make. I mean, are we looking at everything to be visual? Are we looking for some things to be audio? And right, what's the right medium for the right
Mhm.
part of the transaction or the
In
use
many
case?
cases, I guess it also depends on environment, and hybrid approach would be the future most likely. Like as we do the call with you today, I guess then we will have similar interactions with AI. But do you have a call with your marketing managers or finances? You want them to share a screen to show you something because
Right.
you'd still prefer to have visualizations.
Make sure they're listening to you and not multitasking, that sort of thing too. Well, it's interesting though, but think about, I mean, security has gone, facial recognition. When I come back, when I go through the airport now, in many cases, I won't show a passport. I've got global entry in the US. I can walk straight in with my face. Now, if it gets hacked, it's a whole other story. But even that years ago would have been science fiction. So it's amazing what regulations will change and maybe signatures will become a thumbprint or maybe it'll be a retina scan. I don't know.
There is new industry. It's also about quality assurance of the software, but like agent orchestration, quality assurance. Like, how do you assure that agent behaves in the correct way? It's a traceability. It's about logging everything, but it's still software. But
Right.
it looks like all the new types of software is raising. Like there are companies who raise money for audio quality assurance or model quality assurance, etc.
We are looking at some of that. We've actually got some new R&D in the works that I can't talk too much about, where we're looking at potentially ways to how we assure the quality of agents and agentic systems. And we're working with our AWS partnership team actually on doing some of that, maybe getting some funding to do some things there. But I agree with you. That's a huge issue right now. How do you guarantee these agents are going to do what they're supposed to do? And they're non-deterministic by their very nature. And that's one of the things that people don't realize. When you look at RPA or traditional workflow automation, it's 100% deterministic. You script what it's going to do and it does it. The great benefit of an agentic AI type system is it can adapt to unexpected things that happen within parameters. The danger is it might do it outside those parameters. For example, if it's fraud detection, a traditional RPA system would look at our loan documents and it would know if it's this or this or this, I do this. If not, do something else. AI can look at it and say, well, it's not. I haven't seen this exact case before, but it falls within my parameters, and I can do some research and come back and say, based on my research and my parameters, I can approve this loan or I can maybe deny it. And it wouldn't be 100% deterministic. It might be based on it doing a background research of its own, and then it knows to flag it to a risk officer. Now that's not deterministic. How do you test for that? Much harder, because you're not just testing an algorithm with 100 different branching points, a decision tree. You're testing a decision tree that's being written as it's being used.
Yeah. One part is assuring that system is stably working up to 99.9% of the time.
Right, right, right.
Another is how do you build this system and test during improvement and adding new features, new tools, new
So you
agents.
didn't degrade that. Right, right, right.
You just added the new tool, but suddenly this AI started using this tool instead of others that it has to be using.
Right.
Thanks for chat. What's very interesting that you look like you're still like the person who is just entering the profession, because usually this kind of engagement and love to the work you see in people who are starting their careers, but you're here for 20 years, but it looks like you still like what you are doing, even if you mentioned that you hated quality assurance. What is your secret? How do you make yourself still motivated?
Oh, that's a great question. Easy to answer, some maybe hard to replicate. I don't know. First of all, I was very intentional building the company. I built the company to be a company that I enjoy working at. So, and I think by bootstrapping the company, first of all, and I'm not saying you can't raise money and and enjoy what you do. When you raise money, you create an event horizon. You create a 5-year window till you raise the next money, the next money, the next money. And we may raise money at some point. So I'm not saying this, don't ever do this. But certainly I was intentional about where I was in my life, what I wanted to get out of that. And at each stage as the company's grown from being, sub $1 million to being where we are today, and also going from a small number of clients, mostly, all online, to having a partner network, working with people around the world, expanding into larger accounts, doing things that I had done before, different types of marketing, hiring people who knew marketing better than me. I think it was the enjoyment of watching the company grow and building a team of people I like to work with. So I like working with my team most of the time. Occasionally we have arguments, so I won't say it's all the time, but most of the time I love coming to work. It doesn't feel like work. The team is a good team. Our clients are generally good. We're not stuck doing the same thing. We're building new functionality. I mean, I think every so often you get into like a rut. So I think 2 or 3 years ago, we had a web app, we had a automated testing tool. We were adding functionality, but it felt like we got into a bit of a rut. And if you'd asked me the question, was I still passionate? Yeah, somewhat, but maybe not as much. And then the AI came along, and it was like, wow, this is going to change everything. And I think 5 years, 8 years ago, it was cloud, and before that was maybe mobile. And so I think if you like what you do and you're open to the innovations, I think you get these new points of rejuvenation. But if I was doing the same thing 20 years that I started doing 20 years ago, a small team building one app that did one thing, and it was the same go to market, I think we'd be bored, and I probably would have sold it or given up. I don't think I certainly wouldn't be as excited about it as I am today. So I do think if you're going to be in a business for a long time and you're not going to try and sell it in 5 years, you've got to find these points of rejuvenation. Find things that challenge you, find things that excite you, find things that scare you. So I would say getting involved with AWS and building that partner channel, looking to innovate in AI was kind of scary because until now we hadn't really done that. We'd mostly been agnostic to the cloud. We'd been, whichever cloud you want to use, we'll use. We decided we're going to really partner with one, invest a lot of time and energy into that channel, into innovating, into building AI, and then, previously with other things we've done. So I think every 4 to 5 years you have to rejuvenate what you're doing and find something new that excites you. Otherwise, you're just going to get bored, and then you start to get jaded, and then you won't be excited about what you do. And then I think then it's time to leave and find someone else who will run the company or sell it to someone. It's okay to do that. When you've lost the passion for what you're doing, it's time to think of something else, I think. Obviously, you may need the money, so maybe you don't, but ideally.
Yeah, I totally agree that first 5 years you learn a lot of new things like marketing, sales, etc. And then
Yeah.
hopefully there are some new things coming like AI or new technologies or new size of the company and new challenges.
Yeah, partnerships, international expansion, hiring people in other countries, expansion sales on the business dev side, on the product side, cloud native, microservices, mobile. I mean, there's been so many, React, the front end technologies like React. A lot of stuff just technology moves fast, and if you keep up with it, and you can't always change everything. Obviously, you got to have your product still working. You still got to support current customers. That's always the thing. You can't throw everything away and start again, but you can find ways, I think, to infuse new challenges, whether it's on the business development side or the operations side or on the technology side.
And as I agree with you, as you mentioned, you need to have people who are also like what they do, like that brings you this energy. Because if you're the only person who is liking what you do, it would be hard. But if you have a team that mostly likes coming to job, yeah.
Right. And one thing I will say that may be unpopular is that there may be times where you've got to let people go. If there are people you feel like are jaded at the company and have lost that passion, and maybe maybe they shouldn't be there anymore. And we've had to do that too. So during the last, 19 years, we've had times where we've realized that someone who would, really loved working for the company when it was this size or worked in this way, they really haven't enjoyed the shift. And they were staying because maybe they needed a job, or maybe they stayed because they couldn't think of anything else to do. Or sometimes we've had to ask people to leave because in the end, if you have people who are like the drag on the company, it starts to affect everyone else. So I do think as a founder and CEO, or if you're a leader in any capacity, you need to make sure the organization is healthy. And if you have people who are either just maybe jaded or maybe toxic even, but even just people who maybe have been there too long, it's good for them actually in the long run for them to go somewhere else because they're not really happy there. They're not making everyone else happy there, and I think it drags the company.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very energetic and valuable conversations with a lot of
Thank
gems.
you.
We talked about the progress of AI in software development, teams, and your interesting and motivating story about funding the product. that
Thank you.
makes you love what you do. Thanks. Like, do you have anything you would like to leave for our audience at the end?
One thing I always like to think about what would be helpful for other people. One book I read a long time ago when I started the company that would be very interesting, I think, for people would be, it's called Selling the Wheel. Maybe you read it. It's a great book. And I think it talks about the different stages in a product life cycle. And it was really helpful for me thinking about the company. It's called Selling the Wheel, and it's about someone who invents the wheel. So there's no wheels, they don't exist yet. It's like a Stone Age, and the guy invents the wheel. And everyone's like, "What's a wheel? Why do I need a wheel? I don't need a wheel. I've got a buggy. I can pull it along. It doesn't need a wheel." And I won't spoil the book, but the whole point is there's different parts of the product life cycle, and using the analogy of the wheel, it's really helpful in you looking at your new idea and saying, where is this idea on the innovation spectrum? Because how you develop it, how you fund it, how you sell it is completely different. And I think it really helped me understand that we were building a product that was, in many ways, a competitor product to what existed already, but cheaper, better. It wasn't wholly new. And that meant we marketed it in a certain way. If you're building something that's completely new and revolutionary, what no one's heard of, it's a different kind of product, different kind of marketing. And I think that book is really helpful. And it's kind of light reading, it's not too heavy. So I would say Selling the Wheel, great book, really helped me on my product journey.
Thanks. I'll buy it today.
Thank you.